Hi, I'm Don Moores, and welcome to Montgomery Week in Review. Since the shutdown of the Gazette newspaper in Montgomery County, the wonderful Sentinel News Service is the one sole weekly newspaper left to keep us informed in our community. Brian Karem, executive editor of the Sentinel, is here to tell us all about the plans the Sentinel has for the near and medium-term future. Well, we all thought that the Montgomery County budget for FY16, which passed in the spring, was the final word on the subject. Unfortunately not. And Linna Barnes, who comments for this program, is also the assistant producer, really the poobah of all poobahs. She's here to tell us why this may not be true this year and why the budget process is opening up yet again. Before you make plans to travel to Cuba, the Beacon newspaper has some suggestions and warnings for you. Stuart Rosenthal, the publisher of the Beacon, is here to report on Cuba, also on the housing section in this paper, and so many other health and related stories. Our Montgomery County Commission for Women has a new executive director. Jodi Finkelstein has joined us today to tell us about the history, achievements, and the future she sees as the new executive director for the Montgomery County Commission for Women. Brian, congratulations.
Thanks. And we're not toasting each other, but thanks.
And then there was one.
Yes, that's we started out here, and we're the last guy remaining. General interest newspaper, the Beacon, of course, is part of Montgomery County, as are there are smaller publications, but we're the last remaining general interest newspaper that publishes in the entire county.
You know, when I grew up, the Gazette was not there. We read the Sentinel.
Yes.
The Sentinel came to us. We had the Advertiser, the Sentinel. I mean, this was, and
160 years going strong.
So, what plans do you have? How do you? I had this conversation this morning where somebody said, Don, when are you guys going to talk about the Gazette and going down? How are we going to get our local news? I said, well, today, as a matter of fact. And so, how do you get the Sentinel before every Montgomery County citizen?
Well, we're doing it right now, being here, but I mean, we're the Montgomery County Sentinel. We're a subscription-based newspaper, been here 160 years. There's a website, www.thesentinel.com.
Right.
We'll take your money right now if you want to if you want to be a member of our subscribers, and we'd love to have you. We have covered the county, continue to cover the county. We're going to be in, we're expanding our print run, and we're expanding our distribution to a variety of different venues within the county, and that's part of it. Bolstering our editorial staff and our sales staff to take over some of that stuff that has fallen by the wayside since the Gazette has collapsed. And that's the goal.
Let me ask before opening up, what do you see as the reason why the Sentinel works and why perhaps the Gazette and other papers have not succeeded?
I think that boils down to, we have a commitment to community news and have for 160 years. One of the biggest issues in the paper this week is regarding a Confederate statue controversy in the city of Rockville. Mm-hmm. We've been there for the, we can frame the discussion because our newspaper actually has covered it from the time that statue was built to the controversy that surrounded it during the last 100 years. So the sense of history is strong. But more importantly, it's our commitment to community news during that 160 years that makes us viable. I don't think the Post and the Gazette, the current owner, did not have or did not see a vision for community news that we see, and that's the big difference.
Okay. And I think it's interesting when you say 160 years. Obviously, you were here before the Civil War.
Yes.
Brian, you personally.
You're looking good.
You know, I age well. The paper, in fact, the paper was founded by a Southern sympathizer, Matthew Fields, who during the Battle of Gettysburg, and he was lucky enough that he wasn't displaced then, but immediately prior and afterwards, he was displaced by federal troops and produced the Montgomery County Sentinel in his barn a couple of weeks because he was on the run. But yes, prior to the Civil War, we were there for the Battle of Gettysburg. We've been there in the community since it was pretty much a community.
Did you see the falling of the Gazette coming, or did it take you
by surprise? It didn't take me by surprise. I know some people said it did, but I did not see it as a surprise. I saw it as inevitable as their staff continued to shrink in their commitment to local news. There were some really great, bright people that worked for the Gazette, and I don't think upper management took advantage of the people they had there and allowed them to do what they could do when they were there. So my hat's off to the people. I bleed for those who left and are without work. We'll hire you. But I don't think upper management saw a commitment to community news. It's not a matter of the internet. It's not a matter of advancing technologies. One of the biggest growth areas in our industry is in community newspapers. You have to know your audience. You have to make sure that you cover the news that is important to them, and you have to do it expeditiously.
And I think that's what everybody has said, that one of the big things is high school sports.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I mean, who covers that? I mean, the Post might have
We do.
Exactly. I mean, the Post isn't going to cover it. They might have a box score about high school games, but that's going to be it. It's not going to be
We do a
stories.
high school preview issue. We preview all 29 high schools in the county, private and public, rosters, schedules, pictures of the kids. I mean, of course that's huge. Basketball the same way. All the high school sports. That's where you've got to start and build. That cuts across all socioeconomic barriers. Everybody loves to see about their kids, and that also, it's cheerleading. It's all the stuff that goes on in the schools. It's the local stuff that happens. Why is this street closed? Where can I go to eat? Those things are important to people, and they mean much. You're not going to find that in the Post.
No, and you're building community, and I think that's what's really important.
It is huge. And like, for example, when we were talking earlier, the stuff that you guys do, we have to be there for it. And there is no one, when we are dedicated to making sure that we serve the community and we make sure that the community is serviced by a disinterested third-party observer and not government. And that's key and critical. You have to have an independent voice, and we've long been that.
Subscription, but not advertiser primarily. I mean, that's what the Gazette was looking at.
Well, they were free. They were a free newspaper. They mass produce, and when I first moved here, I'd get that on my doorstop and I throw it away because I didn't want it. If you want the Sentinel, you'll get the Sentinel, and that's the difference.
And Brian, I can tell you, we want you back.
We'll be back.
We'll bring the Sentinel back. Thank you so much. Linna Barnes.
Hello.
Welcome back.
I'm glad to be here. I was actually here last time when you weren't here.
Yeah, I've been away for a little bit.
She's giving you grief.
You know what's terrible is that my other part of my life, my work and my family, gets in the way of what I do.
Understand how that can be more important than Montgomery Week in Review. Speaking as a producer of the show.
Thank you. I'm humbled.
Thank you
and
for your
chastened.
dedication.
So let me ask you this: this budget thing. There was a court case where tax money. We've got to return tax money. We've got the governor doing different things. This whole budget, hasn't it all been opened up again, especially towards education?
That's essentially it. May is when the county council voted on the budget that started July 1st, and it runs from July of 15 through June of 16.
And just to be frank here, we are in July. The fiscal year, the 15-16 fiscal year has already begun.
And we are in, this is the budget we're talking about, the money that's being spent right now. They think there's going to be a shortfall of about $50,000, 50 million, not thousand, if only. Now, 50 million, it's a combination of the state making miscalculations and how they sent the income tax payments. They sent too much money. So at the final payments, they'll be sending less money.
Okay.
And then, as you mentioned, this court case, which is Wynn versus the Comptroller of Maryland, said that counties can't tax out-of-state income. That's a double taxation if it's.
So we've got a couple issues with the comptroller.
And there's
Peter.
also economy. I mean, the economy is not what everyone predicted it would be.
So we can't predict the economy. I mean, you can go through, but how did they overestimate? How did their comptroller overestimate the tax, or was it the governor? Because we always in Montgomery County we like blaming the governor, not the.
No, it's the comptroller's office.
Right.
They tax year 2012.
Okay.
A lot of people took their money, income they were going to get in 13, and put it into 12 because of the federal tax changes.
Okay.
So the state looked at those figures and went, oh, there's a really lot of income being generated in Maryland, lots of income taxes. As you've heard, Maryland is a very wealthy state. That means you have.
Not to hear our politicians say it,
but it is very wealthy people living here,
right.
And so their income was, a lot of that income was forwarded to 12. The state based the 13 figures they were giving, or not 13, 14, the figures they were giving on that, and they were wrong.
So what's that, right? The bottom line is we're in a whole heap of trouble.
Yes, $50 million is not there.
My question is, this morning, George Leventhal, the president of the county council, said, well, Ike Leggett can propose these cuts, but doesn't mean we're going to pass them. It's amusing to me that Ike has always been a very pragmatic politician, agree with him or not agree with him. He's pragmatic, he's a policy wonk, he knows his numbers. And if he's coming at us telling us this is a problem, I'm giving him the benefit of the doubt. For the county council then to say, well, we're not going to pass these cuts, I'm wondering who's denying reality here? Is it Ike or is it the council?
It's the council. The money, I've seen it in other jurisdictions and municipalities. Right. Everybody in the state of Maryland got too much money from the state, of the counties and the municipalities. They're not going to get as much money in the future, so they're having big holes.
So I mean, I can understand $50 million is not a drop in the bucket. On the other hand, we're talking about, what, a $4 billion budget?
Sure, but still, he's talking about $10 million for the schools.
And they've already had some cuts.
So, I mean, they're clearly not going to like that. But $24 million for the county government as a whole, and that is reflected. There were delaying the police classes, delaying the firefighter classes. Just
going to have an impact.
It's going to have an impact.
Well, and the question is if the county council is already setting itself up opposing, and this is the president of the council saying it, so you tend to think that it has some weight. Maybe not, but if they're already setting themselves up opposing Ike, it's going to be very interesting to see whose will prevails over the next 6 weeks.
Well, I mean, the budget has to be balanced.
Yeah.
So.
Or whose projects? I mean, it really
whose
gets
projects are going to fall.
I mean, the libraries, they didn't turn to the libraries. They turned to the usual suspects.
And this may sound silly, but if you just cut everything by 1%, would anybody notice? It's what we're talking about.
I mean, some places you really would notice, because some things it's easier to cut than others. I mean, that's always been the federal government issue when they say we'll cut everything 2%. Well, some places have a lot less.
Yeah, like libraries.
A lot less. I mean, I hate to use that analogy, but that's the way you.
Most of it, and most of the. I mean, looking at the budget, you really have to look at the fact that the state budget, 85% of it is already preordained how it's going to be spent, and a lot of the county budget is already preordained how it's going to be spent.
And it's mostly education.
And so where do there really are very few places where you can cut. You can't cut 1% across the board. You have to make very targeted cuts.
I think Mr. Leggett is being very fiscally responsible and doing his best to get us through another.
He's saying you pass this budget, but now we know what the state's what money that we're getting from the state, and it's going to be a lot less. Plus, we have to make these refunds to people.
That's the final word, and hopefully we'll be able to do this in a way. He'll be able to do this in a way with the council that we won't be coming back and having the same conversation next year.
Let's hope so.
Let's see. Thanks, Linna. We'll be right back after these messages. And we're back. Stuart Rosenthal, welcome back.
Thank you, Don.
High point of our show is always when you're on, so
Thank
thanks.
you.
All right, Beacon, Cuba. What an interesting. I had to help a sports team get into Cuba. What a challenge that was. But now with our open, the embassy and everything else, I guess
things
Cuba's
are changing very fast.
Yeah,
but other things are changing very slowly.
Tell us about
So I guess that's the question. That's the point. First of all, it's still officially not legal, really, to be a regular tourist and just to fly to Cuba, right?
Under the law, you can't.
Right.
One of these, there are 12
There are
things
12.
they
There are
have to
categories
do.
you can go on special kinds of trips. You can take materials to churches and synagogues. You can have certain kinds of Right. But just to go as a tourist, no. Just to get on a U.S. flight, look online for flights to Cuba, no.
You know what's interesting
can't do it.
is the Treasury has in there that touristic type activities cannot overwhelm the primary purpose of your trip, which must be one of the 12.
One of which is spending money in Cuba or something?
No. Well, my thought is you have to take
Buying
a picture
a 50
of
Chevy
you with a Cuban, handshake and your people-to-people thing, and then you go to the beach the rest of the day. I don't know.
But the truth is, the government is not enforcing the regulations right now. People are skirting it right and left. You can certainly fly from Mexico or the Bahamas. You can
You can fly directly from the U.S. now.
Yeah, you can do that, but you have to say, I'm going on one of these kinds of trips, even if you aren't, but no one's going to really check. That's really what it amounts to. But if you go and you think, well, now there's going to be really romantic.
I am surprised. That is upsetting to me.
Okay, this is why I'm telling people what they're in for.
I'm so surprised.
I'm telling you what you're in for.
There's a website, your website, people can also be following along with the story.
Yes, sure.
Yeah. And what's that website again?
TheBeaconNewspapers.com. With an S at the end of newspaper.
I'm going to shut up and let you keep going.
Okay, great. So when you go, just keep in mind, for example, the author of the story went and forgot her toothbrush. It took her 3 days to find a toothbrush. Okay, there aren't stores like we expect here in the regular neighborhood. Now, the hotels, of course, have fancy ones. She didn't stay in a fancy hotel. Hotels are about the only place you can really reliably find Wi-Fi as well. So when you're going around, just keep in mind you're going back to the 50s in a lot of ways. You can
absolutely.
You can't Google things. There's no GPS. There's credit cards are almost never accepted, and American credit cards right now aren't legal to use there.
That's so interesting because you
But
think
they'll
of
take
the
your money.
wonderful
cash.
cars.
Yeah.
The 1950 cars.
Wonderful cars, okay.
But that's because it's still the 1950s.
No, but listen
there.
to what's wonderful about these cars. She took a cab ride, right?
refurbished.
Okay. No seatbelts, no air conditioning, doors opening in transit, belching smoke. Okay, it's not...
Sounds like the
Metro.
Yeah. So the same way you take your life in your hands. So
why would you want to travel to Cuba now and not wait until all the
I guess
luxury
there are
hotels
people
come
who
in?
want the idea of going and seeing what it was like in the 50s, how it hasn't changed, the pure, old-fashioned kind of life. Although, honestly, people used to go to Cuba because it was gambling and the fancy hotels, and that's what it's going to be probably in 5 years as well. But right now, it's frozen in time.
And I would think also if you meet some people, some Cuba who haven't met a lot of Americans yet.
Yeah.
And you can have a chance of some interesting discussion.
Well, a lot of people remember it hasn't been that long. I guess it has.
It's been a long time.
I guess. Oh, you see seniors. You
All right,
find
so
everybody.
Cuba, housing. Is there define
okay.
housing in Cuba, or are they separate?
No, the Beacon housing section is totally separate from our travel section. On a quarterly basis, we have an insert on housing and home care options. We have a lot of interesting stories this month. I really don't have time to go into them in detail, but just to give you an idea, there's a Golden Girls Network founded by a woman in Bowie, Maryland, that is now a website, international website, where people can match up with others who want to rent rooms in their homes, or people who are looking for inexpensive accommodations with other fellow seniors.
Is that limited to PG or Montgomery?
No,
or
no.
It's
Well, certainly
nationwide?
it's nationwide, I believe now.
Okay,
Yeah.
keep going. We got such a short
We have an
time.
article on special accommodations for people who are in apartment buildings but who are either getting old or have disabilities and need certain things done. There are laws that protect you, but you need to know how to go about getting that kind of thing done. We talk about that. We talk about continuing here retired communities and what the issues are there.
Villages.
Villages, remodeling, all kinds of topics relating to housing. Should I
Let's
talk about the health story?
Let's go
too?
from health.
You're really getting everything in.
I want you to get it because the health. Without you
All right.
talking about health, I don't know what to think about for the next month.
Well, this is a story you may remember. A couple of years ago, we talked about these liquid biopsies where they were able to take blood tests from people, just blood samples, and find cancer cells and identify and start to target cancers. Now it's like routine. There are a number of tests out there. A lot of doctors are using them regularly. You can find loose cells and DNA of cancers in the blood, and then even if you haven't gone to the actual tumor, you get the idea of what is the DNA of that cancer, what kind of treatments might be most effective for it. So it's amazing things that are happening.
Immunotherapy too, right?
Yes,
yeah,
very important with that.
So they're taking the blood sample. That really is fascinating. I mean, take the DNA from it and then
Know exactly how to target.
Target it with your own immune
Exactly,
system.
exactly.
And then fighting.
And then vitamin
It's a
B3,
revolution.
a big study has found that vitamin B3 seems to have an effect on skin cancers, that it reduces the risk of them and the numbers of actinic keratoses and things that people like myself get all the time. So there are lots of interesting things happening in the health field now.
That's great.
And try to cover them.
You're getting before. Okay, last thing. Why should we read the Beacon?
Because there's so much variety of interesting things that you'll
Because
find.
we can find out about this vitamin therapy.
Okay.
We really focus on a lot of health stories that you
Cuba?
don't see.
going
to
elsewhere. That too.
Stuart, thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
We'll look forward to seeing you next month.
Great.
All right. Jodi.
Hi.
It's good to see a native Montgomery Countyite went out and did different things, and now she's back leading one of the most important endeavors we have in the county.
I feel no pressure with that.
No, but you've done it. I mean, welcome. Tell us a little
Thank
bit
you.
about
Well, thank you
yourself
for
and-
having me. Well, you're right. I did grow up in Montgomery County. Went to Rockville High School, go Rams. Then I went to upstate New York for school, came back to University of Maryland for graduate school, and since then I've been working in the field of domestic violence prevention, sexual assault, and women's reproductive health, and I'm actually wholeheartedly really excited to have been chosen to serve as the executive director for the commission.
So, in looking, I mean, the issues of women in Montgomery County and the charter of the commission, it's been so important in ensuring that everything that Montgomery County recognizes and empowers and domestic violence prevention on a whole bunch of other issues, but across the board.
Exactly.
So what do you see as your big goals now that you're all of a few months in your job?
45 days in, what do I want to do for the next 15 years?
Yes.
Well, in all honesty, what I first started doing is going back through the history of commission. It was actually formed in 1972 under law, under statute, to be able to advocate on behalf of women and to ensure women's equality. And it's just been fascinating to read through all of the commission's reports in terms of what the issues were back into the 70s and even now. And unfortunately, a lot of the things that the Commission was working on in the 1970s are still some of the same issues that we're working on today, some of them being issues around custody and divorce, domestic violence prevention, sexual assault prevention, education, job placement, job training. So as the old saying of, the more things change, the more things change.
Do you find that disheartening?
Before you go, there's a contact if people want to learn more about the commission. Is a phone number or website? What do we have?
Sure. They can contact the commission at 240-777-8333.
Okay, thanks.
That's,
Sorry, Brian.
my question is, I having covered these issues myself for years, isn't it rather disheartening sometimes to see that more things change, the more they stay the same, people don't seem to learn?
You know, it is, but it isn't. Just because but again, to say we've come a long way, baby, it is true. But at the same time, there still has to be a long way to go. Taking domestic violence just as a prime example, in the 1970s, people wouldn't be talking about domestic violence, let alone we wouldn't be talking about it on a television show. And when the police would show up to a house, they would blame the victim or tell the gentleman to, walk around the block and, figure it out for yourselves. Now, the sheriff's office is a prime example, as well as the Montgomery County Police Department, are leaders in this area, working together, having formed the Family Justice Center.
I think things stay the same, but there have been changes.
Yes. Yes.
I was part of an organization that was founded at the University of Georgia called Women's Oppression Must End Now, which was women. We were very proud of ourselves. But I think, and that was in the 70s. I think there really was a sense of the beginning of things and making changes. We talked about women in prison, I remember.
Yes. At
that time, that was something that we as a group saw something we wanted to do something about. But the custody issues, a lot of things were going on, and I think they've evolved.
What do you think the biggest change needs to be now, then?
I think we need to continue to talk about it, and some of these things that we consider as women's issues are certainly impact women, but men are involved, like domestic violence. We need certainly more men to be talking about, talking to other men about the importance of not hitting women, something very simple.
And of course, men are also victims of domestic violence.
Exactly.
Too, so it's more of an even, equal kind of thing.
We should all be talking about sexual assault. These are issues that everyone can be talking about. Men can be sexually assaulted as well.
And sexual assaults seems like a down, but it seems like we've had a resurgence with alcohol, ease of getting drugs into drinks, and drugging women, and then they're waking up. It's kind of atrocious that we still have this.
I don't know if it's a resurgence as much as more people are talking about it in public, because these are the kinds of things that people have been talking about behind closed doors for years. There's more video of domestic violence, sexual assault, and I think more people are in tune to wanting to be able to make a difference, and that's something that the Commission will continue to do.
We're almost out of time. We've got 30 seconds left. Give us some of your thoughts of what you want to be doing. How do you see the Commission progressing over this next year or so?
Sure. Well, one thing that the Commission is going to be doing is going on a county-wide listening tour. So the 15 commissioners that were appointed by the county executive are going to be going around the county listening to individuals to hear their stories and what their issues are pertaining to women. And so the women on the Commission will take that information back and figure out what the gaps in services are and determine how we can make the best difference.
You promise to come back and maybe update us on all this?
Absolutely.
That'd be great, Jodi. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And thank all of you for joining me today. And thank all of you in the viewing audience for joining us for this week's edition of Montgomery Week in Review. I'm Don Moores, and please join us next week at this very